Hello, I'm the Reverend Elaine Yavazak, and this is my 18th video for Revelation Faithbook. Today's message will be on angels sent from above to start off the new year. Happy 2016, everyone. It's been a while since my last video. I've been having a really bad chronic cough, and I still have a little bit, but at least the worst of it is over. So we'll see how it goes today. If I have a really bad coughing spell, I can edit that out, or perhaps add it to bloopers with sound effects. Like I really need more sound effects with a cough. Anywho, get right down to business. Some people say that the Lord sends His angels to rescue us during our time of need. Some others may say that it is the Holy Spirit that helps us. Either way, we know that we are in good hands. Today I will be explaining how the Lord's angels got me through the tough times in my life. Some of these scenarios will be depicted straight from both of my books that I've written. The first book is a devotional. The other is about my encounters with bullies. This is my bully book, and this is the devotional. I know of a woman who believes in praying to angels. In Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 and 5, it reads, "You shall not make yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me." Just like the passage says, we are not to pray to angels. A couple of times when I was a kid, I was nearly hit by a car. Once on foot, and another time while I was riding my bicycle. When I got older and started driving, there was a car that cut me off. I began to scream as I was absolutely positive the other car was going to crash into me. Suddenly, I didn't see the car. It was as though it had disappeared as it didn't hit my car. I don't know where it went. Here's a red car, clear as day, going way too close to me, and I knew I had absolutely no time to get out of its way. I screamed because I thought, okay, that's it. We're gonna hit. Strangest thing was the car suddenly vanished. I still don't understand it to this day. But I'm positive I saw that car. I screamed, and where did the car go? It was just crazy. Sometimes an angel can be in the form of a human being, as explained in the next two scenarios. Sometimes my car would break down and I needed assistance. My car had a rear wheel blowout while driving the middle lane of the expressway. I pulled over onto the shoulder of the road. Within 5 minutes, a man driving a street cleaner pulled over and changed my tire. I made it to work that morning right on time, with 1 second to spare. One day as I was leaving the parking lot at work, I noticed I had a flat tire again. I pulled into the parking lot of a restaurant just across the street. There I spotted a young man lying on a blanket, listening to his radio on a blanket on the lawn. I thought it was strange that he was laying on the grass next to a place of business. I walked over to him and asked him if he could change my tire. He got up and walked with me to my car. After he finished, I thanked him and offered him some money. He refused to take any money. He had just passed by me, like barely a second went by. And as I turned around to thank him again, it was as if he had vanished into thin air. He was gone, and so was his blanket and radio. Where's the explanation to that? It could have been an angel sent from God in the form of a human being. Yes, I believe so. Okay, here's a passage from one of my books, from the Devotional. It's found under the date February 25th, A Mental Breakdown. Psalm chapter 46, verses 1 through 3 reads, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea. Through the waters thereof roar and be troubled, through the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. As humans, we can only take so much. If someone continues putting up with more than he or she can handle, he or she risks having a breakdown. There came a time in my life when I reached that breaking point. I was overloaded with stress. I became so depressed, I wanted to end my life. I was bullied in school from kindergarten through 12th grade. I endured much heartache while I was dating. There was a lot of stress from schoolwork and tests. There was even a great deal of deceptive friendships. It all caught up with me very suddenly. One night before going to bed, I overdosed on tranquilizers. I was hoping I wouldn't wake up the next morning. I didn't get my stomach pumped. Instead, I woke up the next day feeling sick. It was Easter, and despite my slurring speech and feeling completely out of sorts, I went to church for breakfast and the service after. When I remembered what I had done, I went to my doctor and was referred to a psychiatrist. I was on medication and in therapy for 10 months. One night while visiting a Pentecostal church, I met a visiting evangelist. He told me I had been suffering from depression for many years. As he laid hands on me and prayed, it was as if God was speaking through him. God told him what was going on with me. The next morning, something was telling me not to take my medication. I stopped taking the pills cold turkey. I felt happy and suffered no withdrawal. When I went to my next therapy session, my therapist looked at me and could tell I was fine. He wrote success in his notes. You could even see it on me. I looked so much better. It was a miraculous healing from God. And at the end of each passage in my devotional, I put a little words of advice. Some Christians think it is taboo to admit they are depressed. If you feel so down that you may harm yourself, get help immediately. Try to get a therapist who is a Christian. It is best to confide in a professional who shares your faith. Here's another scenario. Sometimes angels aren't in the form of a human being. They can't even be seen. Sometimes it's a feeling, or it could have been this feeling in this scenario from the Holy Spirit. This occurred on Thursday, May 16th, 1991. I went to the mall to buy myself a pair of sunglasses. For some strange reason, I felt a wave of nervousness come over me. It was as if something was trying to get me out of the store in a hurry. I looked in 2 stores. I found a pair of sunglasses I liked and purchased it. Then I looked at earrings. I knew my mother didn't want me home soon, so why did I feel this way? So anxious, like I was in a hurry. I couldn't understand what this feeling was all about. I gave into the feeling and left the store. I went home and later to a Bible study class. When I came home from Bible study, I heard fire engines and police sirens nearby. My brother said that a store in the mall had burned down. Then it hit me. I knew it must have been the Lord telling me to leave the store. It was only an hour after I had left the store that the fire began. I heard the fire started in the silk flower department. A flame suddenly sparked and went straight up to the ceiling. The fire spread quickly and 2 employees died, 1 boy and 1 girl, both teenagers. They went back down into the basement to make sure no one else was in there. I felt shaky. I thought if I decided to stay in the store longer, there could have been the possibility of me getting trapped there too. And that passage was located from my bully book, The Evil Within, a Lion's Den of Bullies. February 12th, The Voice of question. And this is a passage from my devotional, Till the End of Time, a Christian devotional for today's young woman. Psalm chapter 121, verses 7 and 8 reads, The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. You begin to feel nervous, jittery, and shaky. You can't seem to pinpoint what it is. It's that little voice inside you that cautions you that danger is lurking. One day after work, I decided to go shopping for sunglasses. Now, this is the same story as from my other book. I included this passage in both of my books. So this sounds like a repeat. It sort of is. The wording is a little different. But the same thing has happened. One day after work, I decided to go shopping for sunglasses at the local mall. While there, I began to get a strange, creepy feeling. It was the type of feeling that you get when something is telling you to hurry. I thought about hanging around a little longer to browse, but that feeling grew more intense. An hour later, I heard one of our neighbor's kids say the mall was on fire. The fire had started in the store where I bought my sunglasses. 2 people died in the fire and several were injured. It was later discovered that the fire had been started by a man who threw a cigarette into an artificial flower display. I got that same strange feeling another time. I was driving to work, so I drove faster than I normally do. 5 minutes later, after I arrived at work, a coworker said a van hit a car, and the man driving the car was killed. The accident occurred on the road I was just on. We are instructed to pray without ceasing. Listen to what God tells you. God can distract you in certain ways to sway you from danger. I've heard of people complaining that they missed their planes only to find out later that their plane had crashed. There are reasons why God does things, and that is to protect us. This next passage is from The Den of Bullies, second book that I've written. This kind of intertwines with my car accident in a way that you'll find out shortly. My secondary manager was getting meaner each day. He would work me like a dog. He would give me so many things to do at once. My heart would pound all day. He also had a very loud voice and seemed to enjoy picking on me. It got to the point where I was mentally saying, God, please get me away from this place. I can't take it here anymore. The problem was, however, if I were to quit, I'd have no income. A few times while at the office, I would get a vivid picture in my head of a wheelchair sitting next to a bed in a hospital room. At the same time, the words, "You are going to be okay," ran through my mind. I had no idea what this meant. I was beginning to think that, am I going to wind up turning crazy from this job? Am I going to wind up in the mental ward of an institution? I didn't know what that meant. Okay. My secondary manager was bullying me as soon as he came in. I had gotten a more complicated invoice to complete, and he was rushing me to finish it. He asked me every 5 seconds if I had finished it. Of course, I rushed like a maniac to get it done so he would shut up. He said, "Give it to me." I shoved the papers in his hands. He found an error, and as usual, made a big case out of it. The screaming echoed off the walls. I gave him an angry stare. I was not going to take his crap anymore. I had had it. I was beyond fed up. I pounded my fist on the desk and I fumed the rest of the day. I could not take one more day at that job. When I went home that day, I prayed to die before I had to go back to work on Monday. I was praying that I never had to go back there again, and got to be careful what you pray for, because here's what happened. That Sunday, Okay, Friday was that really bad day at my job. On Sunday, I was in a car accident. Okay, here's another passage from my devotional. It's on page 37 under January 15th, a confusing picture in my mind. 1 Corinthians 15:51 reads, "Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed." There are times when God gives us signs of tough times ahead and at the same time gives us words of comfort. I hated being at one job every second of the day. Now, this is still the same job I'm speaking about. It's just in my other book that I repeated this again, but worded it differently. I hated being at one job every second of the day. I was the oldest employee in my department and older than my boss. I had a nice boss, but the department head and most of my coworkers acted like juvenile delinquents. The average age in my department was about 25. Distasteful music was played constantly, and each of the workers used profane language. There were frequent thefts. It was so bad I took my belongings home each day. Sometime after I started working at the company, I mentally cried out, "God, please get me away from this place. I can't take it here anymore." The problem was, however, if I would have quit, I'd have no job. A few times while at the office, I would get a vivid picture in my head of a wheelchair sitting next to a bed in a hospital room. At the same time, the words, "You are going to be okay," ran through my mind. I had no idea what this meant. I finally found out a few weeks later after I was in a near-fatal car accident. There was something very familiar about my hospital room. It was the same room I saw in my mind. I was surprisingly calm throughout the whole ordeal. My husband thought I was nuts when I told him that I was so glad to know that I wouldn't have to go back to work for a long time. I actually meant what I said, and I still say the same thing to this day because they were nice to me in the hospital. There were no bullies in the hospital. Okay. The pain from the injuries I sustained was nothing compared to how I felt working at that terrible place. My spleen ruptured and I had a coil inserted to stop the bleeding. My right hip was smashed and had to be reconstructed using bolts, pins, and screws. I was under anesthesia for 12 hours. I fractured my right collarbone, which is raised because of 3 torn tendons and a partridge in a pear tree. I was on disability for 4 months. I was lucky enough to get the job I had before this recent one. An old boss of mine came to my rescue, called me back to work in my old job. That was great that I didn't have to go back to the stressful one. Okay. Have faith that God can change a bad situation at any time. He can close the door to a job that is so bad and open another to a job that is better. If God brings you to it, He will bring you through it. is on page 343 in my devotional under November 4th. Going an unfamiliar route can be fatal. Proverbs chapter 3 verse 6 reads, In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Luke chapter 14 verse 23 reads, And the Lord said unto the servant, Go out into the highways and hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. The highways and byways of life can be difficult and painful. Driving to a place where you've never been can be challenging, especially before the invention of GPS. But even with GPS, certain paths can be quite confusing, even dangerous. When my husband and I were driving one Sunday afternoon in an unfamiliar area, the roads were quite confusing. The arrows were difficult to follow because they were quite misleading. We wound up in a spot that was difficult to get out of, and that's when we were hit by another car. My husband had no injuries, but I had life-threatening injuries from which I eventually recovered. Another road on which I traveled a few times is considered to be one of the most dangerous roads in the tri-state area. I was not surprised because this was an area where cars seemed to speed excessively. I would find myself driving in a lane that ended. Then I got into another lane. That lane ended. And I was forced to switch lanes in a very busy area where there was more than the usual amount of speeding cars and numerous jaywalkers. You don't know what obstacles may come your way. Pray each day that the Lord keeps you safe no matter how rough your journey may be. Let him guide you in wherever you go and in whatever you do. And this is page 42 of my devotional, January 20th. A very strange feeling. Okay, and this was that I got that really strange feeling. Sort of like the feeling I had in the mall before the fire. Well, this is a strange feeling I got before my car accident. Isaiah chapter 41 verse 10 reads, Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. We don't know what lies ahead, the things we may encounter when we walk out our front door. God knows, and he is always there to protect and guide us. It was a cold Sunday morning in the winter when my husband and I went to see where I would be having 2 appointments the next day. He had 2 interviews for childcare because I wanted to get out of that dreadful job so badly. Suddenly, I had a very strange feeling that something bad was going to happen. I felt that it would be a long time before I would go home again. I had no idea why I had this feeling, nor could I understand why it was becoming more and more intense. It felt as though something was telling me not to leave the house. As my husband drove, that feeling of doom became even more intense as we were getting a little lost on the roads, and they were quite confusing. We just had to cross the double yellow line to get out of where we were. We both looked both ways, and it was clear. Suddenly, I saw a tiny dot in the side view mirror. When I turned my head to the right, I saw a car about to hit us. I didn't have time to scream. I leaned over towards the driver's side. That was the last thing I remembered. When I woke up, our car was still moving even though my husband had his foot on the brake the entire time. Our car was T-boned at an angle. The passenger side of the car was where I sat was bashed in. My husband died in a car accident driving the limo. And him and I were in similar car accidents. He was T-boned directly. I was T-boned at a slant. He died. I survived. Despite the multiple injuries I suffered, I felt a sense of peace the entire time. I didn't even shed a tear throughout the entire ordeal. Whether you know something bad is about to happen or just get that feeling that something may happen, know that God will be by your side. He will see you through each and every situation. Page 131 of my bully book, chapter 17, my car accident. Psalm chapter 46, verse 1 reads, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. God is always near us and helps us during our times of need. Sunday, February 4th, 2007. My husband and I were going to head to Eastern Long Island to see where I was going to have my interviews for the 2 childcare positions. Right before we left the house, I was overcome by the strangest feeling. For some reason, I felt as if it would be a long time before I returned home. As we began to drive closer to our first stop, that feeling got stronger and stronger. The feeling became so intense that I began to feel anxious. My husband was fine. I told him to call my parents to let them know what happened. I also asked him to call my supervisor from work to let him know that I didn't know when I will be back to work. After my husband called, he said that my supervisor was shocked to hear the news and sends me get well wishes. I then told my husband that I hate my job so much that I'm actually happy that I'm here in the hospital and will be away from that horrible job for some time. My husband thought I was crazy saying that, but in all honesty, I meant it with every fiber of my being. I was told that my spleen had ruptured and didn't know that the injury was a type 4. That means that the spleen may or may not be saved. It was saved, thank goodness. A type 5 spleen means that it had been shattered and is not able to be repaired. The doctors also debated whether I would be able to be transferred to another hospital where there was a doctor who specialized in my kind of hip injury. I knew my spleen was bleeding, but yet I felt totally at ease, as if God was cradling me in his mighty arms. The pain from which I was suffering was more tolerable than what I endured at work every day. I'm not kidding you. Surprisingly, my parents were calm while the doctor showed them my x-rays and described my injuries. My spleen was spared, a coil was inserted to stop the bleeding. Then I received multiple blood transfusions to get my blood count up. I would have had the surgery for my hip immediately if my spleen hadn't been affected. When my blood count was finally up, I had surgery on my right hip. It had been smashed and had to be reconstructed with bolts, pins, and screws. I was under anesthesia for 12 hours. I fractured my right collarbone, which was raised because of 3 torn tendons. I was in ICU for a week, and in my second week, I was put into another room with a roommate. 1 week later, I was transferred to another hospital for rehab. There was something very familiar about the room I had while in rehab. I soon realized that it was the same room I saw in my mind and heard, "You are going to be okay." I believe it was God letting me know I had to prepare for something terrible. But despite that, it would be okay. The color of the wall was the same, the clock was the same, as was the bed and the wheelchair I had. Oh. April 2007, I received a letter from my job stating that I had been replaced. I didn't care in the least. I figured whenever the doctor said I could go back to work, I would find another job. A friend from that job with whom I was still in touch said no one was allowed to ask what had happened to me. My friend went on to say that our secondary manager had no knowledge of my car accident. For a while, my secondary manager thought it was his fault that I quit. I told my friend that I didn't care if he thought it was his fault. Serves him right. Okay. There was another incident in which I do not recall the exact date, but it was on a Friday during the summer of 2011. This was at my job after the other job, new job here, that I was there for a few years. So this was shortly before I got let go from this job. Okay. There was another incident in which I do not recall the exact date, but it was on a Friday during the summer of 2011. When everyone had left for the day, my supervisor said I could stay for some overtime. He told me someone would be spraying for bugs upstairs to protect the files, but that it would not bother me. As the evening went on, however, I began to feel dizzy, lightheaded, and nauseous, and even felt paralyzed in my chair for some time. Suddenly, I didn't know if I was falling asleep or passing out. My head began to throb. I smelled the throb. The smell became intense, and then I knew that it wasn't ordinary bug spray. The smell was from bug bombs. I was violently ill the entire weekend. I began to wonder if my supervisor wanted me dead. I didn't mention it on Monday. What good would it do? I would only get yelled at mentioning it anyway. So I never brought the subject up. Yeah, that was the last bully boss I had. Oh boy, what a nightmare that was. 3 years, total nightmare of my life. Oh boy. Anywho, what's coming up? Valentine's Day is around the corner. That I'm going to do a segment on friendship. Speaking of friendship, that friend of mine that's seriously sick, I had to just end it. And I'm not going to get into it right now, but I'm going to explain that in the next segment, why and what happened and all that stuff. I should have done that a long time ago. I'm going to save the good part for last. About another scenario that turned out to be really, really fantastic. So, everybody have a great day. And see you next time. Bye for now. Is this thing on? Okay, just making sure. Explain on page 131, my devotional, chapter 17. Now this is in this page 131 of my bully book. What's that noise? There's a creepy noise in here again. Okay. So, till next time. Till next time. Where was I going with this? I forget how I did this now. I think I have it down pat by now. Oh good, I don't have lipstick on my teeth. Okay. I'm going to turn the water back on today. We were doing something outside. I don't know what, but a few hours there was no running water in here. Woo! Okay. Let's have everybody. Everybody have a great day. See you next time.
place, my fortress. For what can man do to me?